Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, March 3rd. I am Charlene O'Hanlon and counting down 2 weeks until St. Patrick's Day, guys. Yes, we've got a great Techstrong TV broadcast for you today. As always, we're going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They talk about 5G and security. We've been talking about 5G for quite a while now and eagerly awaiting its ubiquity. But there are certainly some cybersecurity issues surrounding 5G. So Stephen and Alan talk about some of those and what organizations can do to protect themselves. It's a really fascinating conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Vadim Ojevetsky, who is the co-founder and Chief Experience Officer over at Imply.io. They are chatting about updates to what's Imply is doing with a project Shapeshift, which is, they just reached milestone 1, which includes the launch of a new product and cloud service, as well as a private preview of a major architectural expansion of Apache Druid. So for those of you who don't know what Project Shapeshift is, it is a 12-month initiative to tackle the most pressing issues that developers face when building modern analytics applications, which is kind of interesting. They're actually doing it through a series of new technologies and methodologies. So this is an update on what's going on with that. It's a great conversation as well. After that, we have a very short Haunted Hacker podcast for you. This one is only about 40 minutes long. In this one, host Mike Jones is speaking with Fabrizio Di Carlo, who is the head of product and infrastructure security over at ScoutBee. And they discuss Fabrizio's journey through into cybersecurity. Plus, they talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Really, who's not these days in security, as well as the OWASP Top 10 reports, ransomware, and so many other things during this short presentation or discussion. So check it out. It's always a good time over at the Haunted Hacker. After that, we have our Something Old segment, which is from the recent Predict 2022 event. This one is a keynote address, I believe. It's called The Future of Observability, and it features Mitch Ashley from Techstrong Research, Lodvik Bogards, who is from Stack State, Brian Dawson from Dawson & Dawson, Inc., and Cyril Leclerc from Elastic. And they have a very spirited panel discussion about observability, what it means in 2022, what are some of the drivers that are creating the need for observability, and what steps organizations can take here in 2022 to reach their observability goals. And so much more is discussed in this panel. It's really, really worth checking out. So highly encourage you to stick around for that one. All right, and then I have the news headlines for you, and then I have a great conversation with Liliana Monge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sabio Coding Bootcamp. Sabio is a bootcamp that is geared toward female coders, and so she and I discuss ways that they're working to close the diversity gap in careers in technology. So not just application development, but other areas as well. Just even learning to code can be a beneficial skill for pretty much anybody, and she really does like to focus on making sure that there is gender equity and parity. So it's a great conversation she and I have. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we close things out with the view with Vizard. In this conversation, Mike Vizard speaks with Kubler CTO Oleg Churnikin, who is debunking the top 3 myths surrounding Kubernetes. It's a great conversation there. All right, we've got a fantastic lineup for you today, and we're actually going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, we are back, kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We've got a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They're having a great conversation about 5G and security. This is a very relevant topic. A lot of organizations are looking into 5G now that it's actually a thing, but there are certainly some cybersecurity concerns surrounding that. So this is a great conversation, especially if your organization is considering making the move to 5G. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this segment is Steve Cavey. Steve is with Ground Labs. Hey Steve, welcome back to Techstrong TV.
Alan, it's a real pleasure to be with you here again. It was, April 2020, just as the world was going a bit crazy when we last spoke.
Was it that long? My God.
It was.
Yeah, and here we are, hopefully, just when the world is, well, I don't want to say the world's returning to sanity with everything going on in Europe and everywhere else, but...
I am an optimist, though. I mean, think about, there was just so many unknowns that particular month. And, I think now we've got a lot more airplanes back in the sky. We've got people moving around again. We've got people getting back into the office. I think there is a lot to be positive about. There's always going to be something to not be positive about.
There's always stuff going on in the world.
There is.
Yes, there is. Steve, for folks who aren't familiar with Ground Labs, why don't you just, I don't want to take a lot of time if it's okay, but and I don't want to shortcut you either, but give people a little Ground Labs background if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So Ground Labs has been around for 15 years. The reason why we exist is because of the issue around companies not understanding where their data is. You look at a lot of the data breaches that happen, and very often the data that's been stolen is data that the organization never knew that they were even storing in the first place. So we help companies scan across all of their storage, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, whether it's the endpoint on the server, and all of the strange and wonderful and hidden places where data tends to end up. And we give them a full picture of all the personal, the PI, the sensitive data that's hiding from over 50 different countries, over 300 types of personal data that we can find. And we lay it all out in a single pane of glass. And then we can help you make some risk-based decisions. We can help you do some remediation, cleaning that data up, encrypting it, deleting it, masking it, doing a few other things. And we can also help you spread the responsibility of this cleanup work across into the organization, rather than the IT guys or the security team feeling like they're the ones that have to go to all that effort to clean up the mess that frankly weren't the people that created that mess in the first place. So it makes sense to put it back onto the people who did create that mess. I guess that in a nutshell sums up, we provide the truth of what's really happening when it comes to the handling and storage of sensitive data across your organization.
Very cool. We provide the truth. If you leave it right there, that's good. Hey, Stephen, you know what? I didn't even mention your title, of course, with the company. Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders and chief evangelist here at Ground Labs. Before this, I was in network security. I've got a background stemming all the way back to the ISP days of the 1990s. That was where I cut my teeth on learning networking. And that went through the whole e-commerce boom that we saw through the 2000s. And I strangely ended up in payments as a natural progression of all of that. And that's where I really became exposed to the security issues that were evolving in the world, and then the layering on of all these new compliance standards and regulations that had to come about because, frankly, businesses weren't doing the best thing when it came to data and how data was being secured. And so I kind of became immersed in that. And that's where Ground Labs spawned out of, is this thing that we saw where data was being stored everywhere. And it was just being freely exchanged and handled and emailed and all sorts of other, from a security standpoint, absolutely atrocious things. But organizations didn't have the tools to find that data and lock it down and do the right thing with it. So Ground Labs was born out of trying to make that process simple, and some of our biggest fans in the world ended up being the security auditors, the assessors. And so, I guess my background coming from networking, going into payments, and then through to security and compliance kind of fits in well with what we do today.
Absolutely. It's funny listening to you. We spoke briefly off camera, but my background also started back in the heady days of the commercial internet coming to life in the 90s. For me, out on Long Island, and I thought I was a virtual landlord selling virtual real estate on Sun machines back then, and hooking everyone up to that same T1 line that we charged the same price for, even though there was only I think one T1 line. Actually, there was a time when we got to the T3 and we thought, oh my God, and yeah,
we
started the same way. Yeah.
And then I also went to payments, because the whole e-commerce thing, and then
got involved in e-payments, and of course cybersecurity as well, and then PCI and that whole thing. But I look at the speeds and feeds back then, because it was more, I was doing hosting more than pure ISP, and it was all speeds, feeds, and bits and bytes, right? And now you look at just speeds, feeds over your phone, and we're setting up. We just expanded the office, so we had to rejig the network and WAN and LAN and all that. And, we're on the verge of another, I think, generational change in bandwidth and in our ability to utilize ever increasing amounts, because there's some sort of Moore's law here, where the more bandwidth you have available, the more ways we find to fill it up.
Yeah.
Right. And 5G and all that represents. I mean, it's kind of like wireless Ethernet, or more. At these levels. Of course, like everything else on the internet, it's why we can't have nice things. It presents its own security challenge.
Yeah, you got me thinking there, Alan, because I often do think about, what if I could take my phone back in time to those days? I could run the entire ISP off what our phone can do. And the overall bandwidth capability would be several hundred times faster than what we were paying and what we had access to, in the form of a T1 line, or what, in Australia we called it an ISDN line. 128 kilobits. It did 16 kilobytes a second. That means that 1 megabyte would take more than a few seconds, and that was the norm. And when you were a user at home, you were downloading at 3 to 4 kilobytes a second. That was the absolute max that a modem dialing over an old analog phone line could do.
Yep.
And everybody accepted it because that was the technology back then. And now, even before we think about 5G, the fact that we can download hundreds of megabytes in no time at all. And, I think this whole work from home revolution wouldn't have been as possible 10 years ago as it was instantly, in the last 2 years, because of the speeds that we have access to. I remember trying to work from home in the early 2000s, and the speed was a huge barrier to productivity, having to wait for things to come down before you could work on them. And now it's instantaneous. And so I think the fact that when we've got people working from home, and it's like we are all sitting on the same local area network, is a real enabler. And I think what